Are you an overwhelmed SaaS founder ready to make the leap from leading a team to leading an organization? Join us each week as we refill your think tank with actionable tips and strategies from great business minds you know and those you don't know yet. This is SaaS Fuel with your host, 5-time entrepreneur, SaaS founder, and globetrotting adventurer, Jeff Maines.
Welcome back to the SaaS Fuel podcast, where AI marketing promises infinite scale, perfect personalization, and the fastest way to sound exactly like every other brand on the internet. I'm your host, Jeff Maines. I help B2B SaaS founders like you grow from traction to scale. Here, growth is more than just numbers. It's about crafting a future-proof company, premium valuation, and leaders who build a business of significance while living epic, adventurous lives. Why is it that so many great products struggle to get traction, while objectively weaker ones win mindshare? It's rarely about features and almost always about how clearly and confidently the story lands in a noisy, skeptical market. Today's episode, we unpack why letting the product speak for itself is one of the most expensive myths founders believe. You'll hear how focus beats cleverness, why trying to appeal to everyone quietly dilutes trust, and how the strongest brands use a simple, repeatable playbook instead of chasing shiny tactics. So hard not to do that, right? Well, the conversation digs into the hard work of translating complex ideas into language real buyers actually care about, and why clarity is a growth advantage, not a marketing nice to have. We also explore what trust really looks like in modern B2B, how credibility is built before a single sales call, why proof matters way more than polish, and how consistency compounds faster than constant reinvention. If your product is strong but your message just isn't sticking, or if your growth just feels harder than it should, this episode will change how you think about branding, focus, and standing out for all the right reasons. Let's do this. Our founder on Tuesday was KG Charles Harris, founder and CEO of Quorio. He joined us to unpack why deterministic AI is a game changer for business decision making. You ever heard of deterministic AI? Did you know it's different than probabilistic? Well, that's really cool stuff we talked about on the episode. Drawing from decades in AI and data analytics, KG explained the difference between probabilistic guesses and auditable, repeatable answers, and why speed, accuracy, and effectiveness matter when real money is on the line. It was an absolute masterclass in turning data into decisions you can trust. Our expert guest last week was Alistair Gordon, founder of Expertunity. Isn't that a cool company name? He is a widely respected authority on subject matter experts, and he challenged how organizations treat technical talent. If you're one of those, you're like, yeah, they should treat us different. But it's the idea of expertship, showing why forcing experts into management roles often backfires. Let them stay experts, let them do the magic, and how technical specialties can develop into enterprise skills to increase influence, visibility, and impact without losing their technical edge. Very cool stuff. If you missed either of those episodes, go back and check them out. My guest today is Marlena Sarunac, a marketing strategist who helps early stage startups in complex, regulated industries turn forgettable products into brands the market actually remembers. As a co founder of the company Advice, Marlena operates as a stealth marketing executive for HealthTech, FinTech, and InsurTech founders navigating critical inflection points. Before launching her fractional studio, Marlena led marketing for Fortune 100 companies like MasterCard and high growth startups like Particle Health, where she didn't just scale pipeline, she reshaped how an entire industry talked about health data. Her work blends analytics with bold storytelling, earning her a reputation for helping founders clarify their message, sharpen positioning, and build traction that sticks. Welcome someone who isn't here to dress up pitch decks, but to make sure your message moves the market. Marlena Sarunac. Hey, Marlena, welcome to SaaS Fuel.
Hi.
Well, let's start with your signature approach. Playbook nicely. What does that mean in practice? And why do early stage startups need it now more than ever?
Yeah, I mean, I think the long and the short of it is startups don't have the time or the runway really to burn trying to create a playbook from scratch. And it makes a lot of sense to tap into a playbook that's been tried and true for dozens and dozens of other startups that will allow them to get to basically to both build up the fundamentals that they need to start building up their go-to-market motion, but also get some quick wins too. I think I've been uniquely positioned at, like I said, dozens of startups where I've been able to see from the inside what's that like low-hanging fruit. So where do we start first, but what do we start building that makes sense to invest in now that you can reap the benefits from as you keep building the product, you keep building momentum, you're gaining market signal. The market signal is always going to have you iterate on your messaging, on your product, everything. And so there's a way of going about this with this playbook that we've created at the company advice where you can do that iteratively so that you're not spending a whole heap of money, time, and resources on something that's just going to change in a month or 3 or 6.
That makes sense. We worked with a lot of technical products, health tech, fintech, insurance tech,
Yes.
and help them not just with a product, but help them become unforgettable brands. What's your playbook for translating complexity into clarity that resonates with audiences?
Yeah, it's really doing a deep dive audit, research, getting into the mind of your target buyer. I think one of the things that we've noticed many times is that folks have too many buyers in their mind's eye. They are focused on selling to too many people.
Always.
And so what we do is we come in there, and I've been there before as a marketer where I wanted to talk to all the people. It's like, but this makes sense in this use case, in this case.
Yeah.
You have to get really disciplined. And sometimes you do need a third party who will come in and say, no, we're going to focus on 1, 2, tops 3 buyer personas. And we're going to develop very deliberate marketing and messaging frameworks that make sense to those buyers. Because at the end of the day, until you start really getting out there and getting in front of these folks, you're not going to know what are your selling points. So what we do is, as part of this playbook, we do a deep dive into who your target buyer is. We create your key differentiators by studying the market and the competitive landscape. And we want to make sure that we also have captured who you are as a brand. So what do you stand for? What voice do you like to have? What is your position on the space within which you are building? And when we capture all of that, that's when some of this magic happens where, frankly, there isn't really a playbook. It's kind of my brain. It's translating the product nuances, your vision as a founder, as a leader, as a product team, as a tech team, translating all of those things into human market speak and making it sound different, unique, and resonant. Ultimately, we want the person who sees your message to nod and say, "Oh, yeah, this is interesting. This is cool."
Yeah.
And what I've really loved is that I've had the benefit of working in a lot of category builders. And so I think you have to have the right mindset to think about how do you define that category? How do you really get your arms around the category that you are creating and building and becoming a leader in? And it's different than like a typical marketing or go to market motion. There's subtle nuances there where you kind of have to come in pretty strongly on some points, but create room for iteration.
I like that. What does that look like? How do you do that where you're creating room for iteration and still have the process and the playbook?
Yeah, iteration really comes by allowing yourself to put stuff out there that maybe you're like half comfortable with. Like it sounds right, but you're just not sure. And you publish stuff knowing that it's not set in stone. And that when you get pushback from the market, when a buyer tells you, actually, that's not really a pain point, it's actually this thing, making sure that you have the systems in place that we can go back and quickly update. We can update the bullet point on the website. We can update the one pager. We can update your email flow to better capture that market signal, that market feedback. And so I think it's just like going into it with a flexible mindset, where I think in the past, something like creating a new website was a really big investment. And once you did it, there it was. It was like building a house. You're not going to keep moving rooms around in the house. But we use systems and tooling, and we build websites for people when we get to that stage in the engagement, that allows us a lot of flexibility and breathing room to just go back and update and make changes and just be a little bit more fluid. So it's really a mindset, and it's about being flexible about what you put out there, and being a little uncomfortable with whether or not you're totally sure that this is the right thing.
Oh,
You just
that's
have to
really good.
try,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Well, storytelling is something that you do very, very well, and taking complex ideas and putting them into a story. I think a lot of times founders believe their product should just kind of speak for itself. Hey, I made this awesome thing and everybody's going to
Yeah.
love it. Why is that mindset dangerous in today's saturated market landscape?
Well, I think you just hit the nail on the head. It's a saturated market landscape. And additionally, what we're saying, particularly in venture-backed companies, is the milestones that you used to be able to hit to raise a Series A or B or even a seed, everything's been shifted back. The goalposts are moving pretty rapidly, and you have to start demonstrating true market traction, some repeatable go-to-market motions that you feel pretty confident about earlier and earlier on in your company's journey. And so if you think that like building the product that you will be able to find investment and funding because it's a great idea, it's not probably not going to happen in this current landscape. Like maybe 10 years ago, maybe even 5 if you were a health tech, 5 years ago. But today, you really need to start honing in on that go to market, on your messaging, on your positioning, and start demonstrating to investors much earlier on, pre-seed, that you understand the space and that you're not just going to burn through their cash.
That's really, really good. What do you think the landscape looks like? It has changed for sure, and what's required. And so you have to show up the same way on the website and the pitch deck and on social and everywhere else. But just the maturity or kind of the level of the company, and I'll say sophistication, not exactly the right word, has to be at a certain level before you're even being considered for seed. I mean, let alone, A round or beyond.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the ways that people show up now, a lot of like the tooling, it's commoditizing things that used to take people and teams a long time to do. So
Yeah.
it's much easier to throw up a website. Now people have ChatGPT writing copy for them. There's a lot of automation in place now where you can start to look bigger than you are by exactly to your point, like making sure that your LinkedIn is saying the same thing that your website is and that your email drip is. But that is also kind of raising the stakes, right? Because now
Yeah.
if everyone's doing it, now how do you actually truly cut through the noise? And that's kind of like where like that, art and science of a marketing expert really, I think, pushes you up another level.
And that goes beyond just the way that you show up in a pitch deck. Marketing's a lot more than that, or even a website. Yeah, it's
Mhm.
making the market care. Why
Mhm.
should you made a great product or you made a product? Why does anybody care about it? Why should anybody pay attention? How do you help founders find positioning that sticks and really resonates and makes the audience care?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think on one hand, you as the founder, it is really up to you to know what your story is. You don't have to express it in like the most perfect terms and the most perfect words and vocabulary. That's okay. That's what I'm there for. But you need to know like why did you build this, and who are you, what are you solving for who? And what I will help you do is fine tune that further so that it really makes sense and that it really resonates. And I think that the only way that one can do that is like get fully immersed in this space. Additionally, someone who's done this, multiple times, you know, there are certain things that I listen for that, being in these highly regulated, complex spaces, a lot of companies say the same thing, and I kind of have like an ear for it at this point of my career. And so what I love to do is dive in with founders and their in the founding teams and try to pull out that thread of like, okay, but what's actually really cool and special about what you did here? And oftentimes it's something kind of buried. Like they don't even realize that this is the
Right.
unlock. And I think it's just, when you are in it and you are flying the plane, building the plane, hiring people to pilot the plane, you might get like lost in the weeds.
Yes.
And I think that's why you benefit from like an outside perspective to come in and just help you reorient a little bit.
It's really good. Well, what are some of the most common messaging traps you see in SaaS teams that especially that founders fall into in complex industries?
Yeah, I think, going too broad and also saying way too much. You have to strike something in the middle and then throw in ChatGPT messaging tropes. Like if I see another company say that they turned chaos into clarity, I'm going to scream. That is like such a ChatGPT tell. And there are just a couple of those that, again, as someone who's looking at this stuff day in and day out, I can see it, I can sniff it out. If you don't have the time, or you're just not in that position to do that yourself, you'll never know. You'll be like, this sounds pretty good. Yeah, we turned chaos into clarity. Boom, boom, boom. That's our headline, that's our booth. And then suddenly you're walking around at these conferences and you're noticing, oh, everyone's
Everybody
booth is
else
saying
does
the
too.
same thing. Oh, okay. Like you have to get much more specific. What's the hook? What actually matters? What problem are you solving? Let's get specific. But at the same time, you can't be so unbelievably specific and so unbelievably detailed that people are like, wait, what do you do actually?
Right.
And then as things change, as they inevitably will, and you're going to have some pivots, then you have to go back and change a lot of details that you've published. And that's kind of like a silly place to be too, and a time consuming endeavor. So there's a way to strike a balance and really, I could pontificate on how to, but it matters really on a company to company level. So like I wouldn't even be able to tell you like do step 1, 2, and 3. You really need someone with like a good ear and a good eye for this to step in and kind of assess what you are doing fundamentally at your company.
Yeah. I think that that's really good because so many founders want to go really broad because they don't want to miss revenue. Don't
Mhm.
want to alienate anybody, especially in
Mhm.
the early stages. And then, you can go the other way where you get so far down in the weeds, but it's not really, you're talking more about features and what it does, not the problems that
Yes.
it solves and the outcomes that it delivers.
Yes. And oftentimes those features really matter to the users, and oftentimes the users are not your buyers. So being able
Yes.
to discern between the two is tricky because that's often muddled. We see that a lot. That people can't express the benefits. They can rattle off the features all day long. They can't tell you the benefits, the outcomes, the problem solved. And they are rattling off this litany of features to buyers who probably don't probably won't appreciate that level of,
Right.
intricacy. They wanna know on a high level, what business problems is this going to solve for their enterprise or their company?
And how do you recommend messaging that when this is very, very common, and I love that you brought it up, that the buyer and the user are two different groups. So you have
Mhm,
somebody that's the decision maker that's not necessarily using it, and then you have users that have to actually use the product and like it in order to
mhm.
get that benefit. How do you message all of that, even on a website?
Yeah, well, we think about like the funnel. And so we're trying to attract, sometimes we are trying to attract both. Sometimes we're trying to attract users who can advocate for the your product, your SaaS, whatever it is, internally and bring it to like that buyer and be like, hey, this would like actually solve a lot of issues for us if like we had access to this API or this data set or this platform. That we do through more specific areas that you can put all this like more specific messaging, for example landing pages. So one of the things that folks I feel like don't realize is like your website doesn't have to say absolutely everything, but we can spin up landing pages relatively easy, shoot out some targeted ads to those targeted specific users and personas that we're interested in gleaning insight from and seeing if that kind of like helps drive that lever for you. Additionally, maybe more traditionally, we do usually keep the website as the buyer facing, interface. And then we develop really strong materials that they can then hand off to their other team members who are inevitably going to come in and kick the tires to make sure that their questions are being answered. And then lastly, another key area of focus is, again, depending on your whatever it is that you're building, if you have documentation, docs somewhere on the website, documentation is a great way to answer a lot of those really technical, deeply technical questions. So make sure that your documentation is up to snuff, that it's written really well, that you have clear use cases in there. That'll help you a lot with buying the trust from the users who might be a little bit removed from the buying process.
Yeah. You mentioned trust, and there's certainly a trust recession in sales, and I think a lot of it around software, and even more so in some industries, finance, healthcare, for sure. How do you build trust with the buyers to get them to, to engage and get them, to get more time on brand?
Yeah, I think it really depends on where you are as a company. A lot of folks will lean into some early strategic partnerships that they have, talk about them, like let's get those logos up on the website. Or perhaps you decided to heavily invest, again, depending on your industry, high trust or SOC 2 or whatever security certifications that are really important in your industry. Let's get that up. Let's lean into that so that folks know that you're really serious about how you built this. Other times it's about your team. Where do they come from? What have they built in the past? Let's lean into that. And ultimately, of course, like once you start having customers and the customers are happy to have their logos up on your website, let's talk about that. And let's make sure that you have contracts set up so that you can continue to engage with your customer after they've been implemented to glean insights for case studies, because case studies are going to go a really long way in building trust and credibility and signal to future customers that there are other folks in the market, possibly even competitors, who are gaining a leg up by utilizing this solution. So make sure that you really need to have someone there that's like thinking about all of these future facing opportunities and making sure that you are set up and building out and scaling out your collateral to push that out clearly.
Really, really good. How do you guide startups through, a pivot? You mentioned now there may be several pivots along the way. So maybe a pivot or an evolution in their messaging without losing credibility or confusing the market. So we were this, today, and now we're something different tomorrow. How do we bring people along for that ride?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm actually advising a company right now on this very topic, and it's not, we it kind of feels like a big deal. Oh, it's a pivot. But if you're making the right pivot, the people who you're pivoting from, your audience that you're pivoting from, probably won't notice or care because there's a reason why you're pivoting away from them. Like they haven't expressed interest. There isn't traction there.
Hmm.
Whereas if you are starting to put more attention onto the target user that you are gleaning some kind of traction from, they're probably going to experience the benefits of that, which is more personalized attention, problem solving, understanding of their issues, maybe better service, white glove services, whatever that might look like. Now they're going to start getting even better service from you. And now you're probably going to even better gain that trust and advocacy from that group of people. So if the pivot is the right one, I don't think it should really, rustle too many feathers, because it just says, okay, these folks figured out where the traction is and where the revenue is coming from and where the product market fit lies. And so they're smart. They're no longer trying to be everything for everyone.
Oh, that's really good. Yeah, I think we worry more about that than the market does.
Mm-hmm.
The people that like that, the people we're pivoting away from, they don't care anyway.
They don't care anyway. And guess what? If someone really cares, their memory is pretty short. Once
Yes,
that press release goes out, I kind of doubt they're going to remember, 10 days later.
this is true. Well, you've been pretty vocal about AI generated content. And,
Mhm.
of course, we're going to turn some chaos into clarity here. I create that content because it's polished but soulless. I love that.
Yes.
Just your words. I mean, it's so good because it's true. Where's the line between using AI for efficiency and then losing the human spark?
Yeah, I think you just need to have a human in the loop. It's really simple. You just want, listen, I love AI and I love ChatGPT and I love automating treacherously time consuming, mind boggling,
Yes.
tasks. And I love it. I would consider myself like almost a power user in that regard. However, I definitely treat it like like an early career intern, really. And you really have to direct it the right way in order to get the output that you need. And again, I think it kind of comes back to having that ear and those eyes, being in the space, seeing zillions of websites, zillions of value propositions. You need people on your team who can kind of sniff out what's become like a commoditized tagline versus what's really going to differentiate you. So I think keeping a human in the loop is imperative. I see a lot of people sending me, AI generated emails. I see them rewriting work with AI. I see them sending, high level bullet points, with AI. And it kind of makes me stop and think like, how much did you actually really think about this? It kind of makes me first of all question that a little bit. And me as a professional in the space, I'm probably early in that curve. I think soon enough you're going to start seeing that customers and users and consumers are going to start sniffing that out too. We see this with like AI generated content where, you know, I think there's a good portion of us who can see AI generated content and sniff it out pretty quickly, but there's a huge percentage of people who don't know that it's AI generated. And it could be the craziest meme or video or
Yes.
whatever that you see on Instagram, on Facebook, wherever you are. And like I'm what I'm predicting is that in the next couple of years, that curve is going to start showing that more people are going to be able to sniff it out as well. And so I think that's definitely going to be reflected in how you talk about yourself and sell yourself. And if you feel like you nailed it by generating a completely AI generated website, messaging, deck, whatever, the whole shebang now, yeah, you probably shaved off some time now, but in the long term, I think that you're going to start to see a degradation in the output of those materials because people are going to know and see it for what it is, that it maybe wasn't as thoughtful, that it doesn't have soul, that it's not actually differentiated from the, you know, four or five other solutions that they're evaluating, or maybe everyone's saying the same thing. Maybe one sticks out in the crowd because they kept a human in the loop. So
Right.
I think if you want to continue to stick out in the crowd, don't do what everyone else is doing. And everyone right now is, highly leveraging these AI platforms.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's really good. I love having the idea of having a human in the loop and not just taking it for face value. I mean, it's really cool to be able to have a one click and it builds a website for you. The problem
100%.
is anybody can do that and they all look the same. And I think that's one of the dangers is the more it's used, the more everything just starts to be that mushy middle
Hmm.
beige. Why would anybody even care?
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. And AI definitely is leveling the playing field in content creation. So, what is going to be the difference then, in addition to a human in the loop, for brands to stand out in the next, say, year and a half?
Yeah, I mean, I think an investment in your visual identity along with your messaging is going to be really important. So how are you perceived just visually when somebody comes interacts with your brand? Is your brand from a visual perspective speaking on your behalf in a way that's accurate? This is kind of hard to achieve. This is why you can't do a rebrand in a few days or a week or even a couple of weeks. It takes a lot of iteration, a lot of, workshopping, because it is so human. And there's a few human processes that when done well, you can just achieve just with, a snap of your fingers. So I think that your visual identity is going to be very important, especially as, like, we've just discussed, like the verbiage is becoming a little more, commoditized. This visual identity, I think you still need humans in the loop who can ask the right questions and translate that correctly, because You can, and I do this for a living, and I've utilized a lot of, AI tooling, and it's not quite there yet. It's not generating the outputs that I'm looking for. Whereas when I work with a human, I'm getting there much faster and much more, accurately.
Ever notice how every leadership book tells you to take the journey, but none really show you the map? Well, after scaling multiple companies to over 260 million in combined revenue and working with over 1,000 leaders, I discovered the key difference that separates leaders who burn out from those who build unstoppable momentum. It's not strategy, not charisma, it's not even luck. It's relationships, specifically four of them. My new book, The Captain's Keys, reveals the stability matrix, a proven system that transforms leadership from survival into sustainable success. Inside, you'll discover the four critical relationships every leader needs and exactly how to build them. You can get your copy at thecaptainskeys.com, Amazon, or your favorite bookstore, and it's available in print, ebook, and audio. You don't need another playbook. You just need the right people in your boat. And then what would you say? I mean, some people think brand is just it just is that visual identity, pretty pictures and logos and that kind of thing, but it's so much more. How would you know, convince a founder that brand is worth investing in?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think a few years ago, that conversation was much more difficult. Now it feels like people are getting it. And I think it's because a lot of what is working in the consumer space is trickling into the B2B space. And it's because these B2B companies and brands want to want to look as interesting and sound as human and unique as a consumer brands are so successful at. And so it's actually become like a less of a difficult sell. And but when it is a sell and when someone is unconvinced, what I describe is, there's the concept that everybody is familiar with, which is technical debt. And when you take
Yes.
certain shortcuts and you don't build things out the right way the first time or the second time around, you're accumulating debt. And the same thing happens with brand. If you're not doing it correctly, you're not doing it iteratively, you're not investing in it at all, you're going to accumulate debt that you will have to pay for one day. And then that day is going to be expensive. It's going to be laborious. You're going to have a zillion things to update. You might experience something akin to a pivot where like a full rebrand, refresh is going to make everything look totally different. And this could end up being a jarring experience for users and for the market. And you don't want that. You want to do this in an iterative way. And you see this with, really successful companies out there where you kind of don't even realize that they're doing it because it is done so elegantly and
Right.
iteratively throughout the life cycle of that company until you go back in like the way back time machine. You're like, oh my God, Airbnb's website looked totally different 10 years ago.
Yes.
But you don't realize it day to day. You're not like, oh wow, they totally changed everything. It's just like minor things, tweak, tweak,
Right.
tweak, tweak. So I think that I think once you start talking about brand debt in a way that's relatable to technical debt, which most founders are familiar with, they start to be like, aha, okay, I don't want that. So where do we start now?
Oh, that's really smart. And it is. It's those small changes over time, and it doesn't have to be a jarring experience. And I
Mhm.
think that's probably the difference in doing it gradually versus a hard cut over. It's we're going to eliminate all this brand debt at once and completely rebrand. Like,
Totally, totally.
yeah.
And it's also about having the right people in the room who are helping you build up that early iteration of the brand in a way that we know we're going to grow from here. So how do we make something that's scalable? How do we make sure that you're not locked in to some weird colors, fonts, graphical elements that are going to limit you and box you in? How do we make sure that there's breathing room with this brand? And that takes a very specific type of a brain. My business partner, Lubna, that's her brain. She thinks about brand systems, design systems in this way. And additionally, what she's really excellent at is thinking about, okay, so now how does this translate to your product user experience? How does the UI reflect what's being shown on the other outward facing materials, collateral, website? We want to make sure that there's, a coherence there. Otherwise, people are going to be like, what the hell is this when they log into your platform and it looks
Right.
totally different, sounds different, has a weird color scheme that doesn't match the glassy website. So the two really need to be a step in step.
And then having that alignment, and that's not something you can just get from ChatGPT. I mean, you can generate images, but
Hmm.
that doesn't give you an aligned brand with messaging and your product, and you really kind of unite that whole experience.
Yeah, it's a great jumping off point. It can be a great generator for ideas.
Yes.
It can help you articulate, what you're trying to say or share, but I still am a proponent for a human in the loop.
Yeah. Well, startup world, move fast, break things. Revenue generation is, we want to do that super, super fast. How do you balance storytelling with revenue generation and continue moving fast?
Mhm. Well, I think that if you have the right foundations in place where you can connect those revenue generating moments to specific campaigns or specific messaging, specific positioning, that needs to be captured, documented, and disseminated to the rest of your team. I think oftentimes, we see in companies that that message that insight does not trickle down, and so everyone continues to run in the hamster wheel of trying this, trying that, and then someone will mention in an offhand remark, "Oh, actually, this landing page like really resonated with these guys, and that's why
Hmm.
they decided to
Yeah.
hop on the call, and now they're signing a deal this week." What? I've had this like head exploding moment multiple times throughout my career where I'm like, "Do you think it would be important for me to know?"
Right,
Because
right.
now I'm gonna go study that thing and I'm gonna copy paste it and make sure that we have, more of that going out there. Like, we like money, right? So why don't we share the insights that are generating the money? That said, it's really hard to do if you don't have some basic foundational things at place. Like, you need to have, something that looks like a CRM, not spreadsheets, not the notes on the founder's phone. You need to have something that is capturing this information in a way that other folks can come in, study it, and replicate it.
And that's a great use case for AI and is, being able to track those conversations and
For sure.
yeah, so much easier now than it was just even a few years ago.
Yeah, dump in a transcript from a
Yes.
sales conversation and
Unstructured data.
pull pull out what were the questions that they were stuck on. And then you can turn that into FAQs, you can turn that into more collateral that does deeper dives into those specific questions. It could also impact how you're positioning yourself. Interesting that 5 of these companies are asking the same 3 questions. Obviously, there's room for improvement here in terms of the pitch. So let's, rearrange the pitch a little bit so that these questions don't keep coming up. I think that's an incredible use case.
Yeah, if you're not continually refining your pitch based on, existing pitches and demos and conversations, you're really missing out because that's where all the gold is and kind of turning that back into marketing and making that messaging external because you're entering a conversation that's going on in their heads
Mhm.
and you can't do that unless you understand what that conversation is. And that's where it all comes out is in those demos and in the conversations with prospects.
If you're not only missing out, you are personifying the definition of insanity, right? You just keep doing the same
Yeah.
thing over and over again, expecting a different outcome. It's
Yep.
not gonna happen if you're not thinking, analyzing.
Yeah. Well, there's definitely been a shift in what moves the needle for discoverability.
Mhm.
Keywords, SEO used to be the big thing. What should startups actually focus on when they're building their content and, I'll say SEO slash AIO strategy today?
Mhm. Yeah. So I sit on a council that of marketers that is reviewing this every month, and we chat about strategies and wins, etc. SEO is still very much important. There's no reason to stop thinking about SEO. SEO is baked into this fundamentally. The keywords truly matter, and studying what keywords are going to rank and what keywords your target market cares about are always going to matter until we can start, we have microchips in everyone's head and we can start zooming into everyone's brain and reading their minds. So I think that in terms of GEO strategy, it's about a lot of things. It's about how you're structuring your pages on your website, how you're using the metadata on your website, how you're using FAQs on your website. And then really importantly, and I think this is why PR agencies are going to make a really big comeback in all, in all seriousness in this new space. I think PR agencies are going to make a big comeback because backlinks and getting a lot of coverage across the market is going to be really important in terms of the credibility of your solution in the market, and then how it's ranked and how it's being scraped and evaluated by these AI models. I would be careful to believe in any of anyone who claims that they have the playbook, because the space is evolving so dramatically, so rapidly. We have new models that are being published regularly. There's going to be tweaks to the algorithms constantly. I don't think anyone has a clean and clear playbook that is going to work maybe more than like this week. Like what works this week might not work next week or next
Right.
month. So
Right.
I wouldn't overly invest in any kind of like major promise there. I think the fundamentals still matter. And this is what we talk about in this council. We talk about how do we rectify founder fears that their geo strategy is weak, when really it's about maintaining the fundamentals, that your website is built thoughtfully and well, you have the correct tags in there, your blog is up to date, you have lots of good, rich, deeply researched content. It's not just AI slop. You have a real point of view. You're getting out there. You're being interviewed. You're being quoted. You're speaking on the stage. All of these things are part of the formula. And there's no easy button. There's no GEO button. It's all of these things working as an orchestra to ensure that you're being, found, seen, heard in the space now.
So good. Well, marketing is often the first budget to get cut
Yeah.
when things slow down, or the revenue is not where it should be. We're going to miss some projections, so let's cut marketing.
Yep.
Crazy. Yeah, you argue it's actually an R&D function, not just a cost center, and I think that is absolutely correct. Can you
Mhm.
expand on that idea, and what are founders missing when they treat it like a cost center?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head again. I hate that it's treated as a cost center instead of, R&D, or your muscle and your functional arm that's translating what's going on internally, bring it to market. It could make sense if you're stripping down the product to bare bones and rebuilding it fundamentally, and maybe you need to re-enter stealth mode and you just don't need that. Sure, I can see that. You should still probably have somebody consulting and making sure that there's somebody who understands the product and is prepared to translate it and bring it to market once you're ready. However, I think marketing is one of those spaces where everyone kind of fancies themselves a marketer. It's an area that everybody feels that they can definitely opine on. You don't see
Right.
people walking into a tech meeting and opining, like, is that really the line of code you should be putting in there? Yet the marketing team constantly is being harassed on all
Yes,
sides. Like,
yes.
is that really the good line of copy, or is that? And it's such a unique situation where you're that connective tissue between product and sales. There's often friction there. Why can't we sell this? Isn't it ready on time? Stop bringing this to market. We're not ready. What's it's like all of this craziness. It's the connective tissue. It's kind of like a really misunderstood area. I think oftentimes the reason why marketing is cut is because the expectations are misaligned with what marketing is there to do, and the KPIs are not realistic. I think, yes, I've always operated in a space where revenue was tied to marketing, and you
Sure.
had to prove and validate that what you're doing is generating, movement for the company on the revenue side. Of course, but you can't just solely focus on that, because there's a lot of things that are difficult to measure, like brand awareness. There's a lot of metrics that we can pull together, vanity metrics even. How many followers do you have? How much engagement do you have? But at the end of the day, it can be pretty difficult to measure a lot of the unseen, more intrinsic feelings that people have after they've interacted with your company and interacted with your brand, saw an ad, saw your booth, chat with someone, saw a landing page. Like the attribution there is really difficult to capture and monetize, and by monetize, I mean to tie a monetary value to. And so by not appreciating that marketing is just touching so many things and connecting your company on an organizational level and just eliminating that is pretty short-sighted, and it truly shows that you don't get this, which is remarkable because marketing is something that you can study in school, you can get a degree in it. And yet when I hear people, I don't believe in it, it's like, oh, so you just don't believe in, I don't know, a physics degree? Like there's a practice here.
Right.
There's a practice here, there's a science here, and what's interesting is that there's so much of an art here. And so maybe evaluate, do you have the right people in place? Are they motivated by the right thing? Do they have the right skill sets? But don't just banish marketing because you don't get it and you think it's fluff and you're just trying to cut costs somewhere. Again, that debt is going to creep up, and more often than not, you end up rehiring a marketing department once everybody starts running around screaming that there's nobody bringing the message to the market.
Right.
Sales doesn't have any leads coming in, and it all trickles down. And everyone's like, "Who's going to start owning marketing again?" And
Yeah.
then you see the teams rehire folks. So
Yeah.
I think it's a little short-sighted. I think it's an opportunity to evaluate, are your company KPIs in alignment with reality, with where you are, where you want to be, and are the right people in place in those positions?
Very, very good. Well, if you could give one message to founders who think that they're not ready for marketing yet, what would you want them to know right now?
I mean, it can't hurt to just chat with someone who does marketing. We don't bite. Like, just chat with someone, and maybe they'll illuminate something that you haven't thought about. And if you're a good founder, you're going to be excited that someone's shining a light on a blind spot, because every founder has blind spots. Every human has blind spots. It's just how we are. We don't have eyeballs all around our head. That's not how we were built. So bring in someone like a trusted advisor, talk to your board, your investors, look at the market, give the company advice a call if you want. Like, just bring someone in to evaluate where you're at and hear you in terms of what your goals are, and see if they can't help you, because that's what we want to do. Like, we're all on the same team. Like, we want you to succeed. We're not here to just generate fluff and then and have you fail. Like, that's not the
Right.
point.
Right.
The point is, like, we're excited by your success, and that's why we exist, and that's what we're here doing every day.
That's awesome. Well, where can people learn more about you and about the company advice online?
Yeah, you can find us at thecompanyadvice.com. We also recently, if you are a health tech company, we also recently launched the Healthies Awards, which
Yes.
are awards for strong product UI UX and strong marketing and brand strategy at health tech startups. All you have to do to qualify is be a health tech that's been in business for 5 years or less. And you can just pop over to our website, again, thecompanyadvice.com. You can get more information about that. And we're getting lots of submissions, and we're going to start releasing who the finalists are. But basically, it's like the Webbies, but for health tech marketing and
Love it.
product design. Yeah.
Outstanding. We'll make sure and link all of that in the show notes. Marlena, it's been such a great conversation. Thanks for being on SaaS Fuel. Thanks again, Marlena, for coming on the show and sharing your insights and resources. You can learn more about Marlena and her company, The Company Advice, at, of course, thecompanyadvice.com. As always, all links, highlights, resources, and full show notes are available at saasfuel.com. And be sure to check us out on YouTube as well, at Champion Leadership. That's our channel. You can find everything over there. Thought leaders share. Share this episode with the leader who is allergic to hype, but addicted to results. Love those kind of leaders. How about you? Well, everyone who shares this week gets a buzzword firewall. Everyone who shares this week gets a buzzword firewall. It automatically blocks phrases like game changer, thought leadership, circle back, unless there's actual substance attached, which most of the time there's not. What does it take to build? Here we go, intersection. What does it take to build an awesome SaaS that includes design, machine learning, and audio AI? Very cool. Well, next up, what does it take to build an awesome SaaS that combines design, machine learning, and audio AI? Well, next Tuesday, Alex Berkovic will be with us. He's co founder and CEO of Sphinx. He's going to share lessons from Sphinx and found. Coming up next Tuesday, what does it take to build? Coming up next Tuesday, what does it take today to build an awesome SaaS that includes design, machine learning, and audio AI? Pretty cool combination. Alex Berkovic will be with us. He is co founder and CEO of Sphinx. He's going to join us to share lessons not only from Sphinx, but also from founding. Coming up next Tuesday, what does it take to build? Coming up next Tuesday, what does it take to build an awesome SaaS that includes design, machine learning, and audio AI? It's a very cool combination. Alex Berkovic will be with us. He is co founder and CEO of Sphinx. He's going to share some lessons from Sphinx as well as his previous company, Adorno AI, and talk all about building next generation audio generation models for video. Pretty cool stuff. And then 1 week from today, how do you light up a room and actually move people to action? One of the most dynamic speakers I've ever come across, Martin Lesperance, award-winning keynote speaker and engagement specialist, is going to join us to unpack how emotion, energy, and storytelling drive motivation. With experience spanning the military, education, government, and global stages, including TEDx, Martin brings a powerful lens on what it really takes to inspire lasting change. Absolutely fantastic episode. Really looking forward to that one. So I will see you next time. And as always, enjoy the journey.
Thanks for listening to SaaS Fuel. Full show notes for each episode, which includes a summary, key takeaways, quotes, and any resources mentioned, are available at saasfuel.com. Be sure to follow and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you're enjoying the content and getting value from these episodes, please leave us a rating and review at ratethispodcast.com/SaaSFuel. We'll be sure to read these out on future episodes.